Every morning before dawn, the samurai would sit in silence and imagine 7 different ways he could die that day. Not out of fear, but out of preparation. Not to become morbid, but to become free. This wasn't a ritual of darkness. It was a ritual of clarity, because the samurai understood something most of us spend our entire lives avoiding. That death is not one event waiting at the end of your life. It is 7 events happening every single day, and most of us are too distracted to even notice we're dying. In the Hagakure, written by Miyamoto Musashi in the early 1700s, there is a passage that still unsettles people today. It says that a samurai must begin each day by meditating on his own death, not just once, but in every form it can take. Physical death was only the first. The others were harder to face because they required something more difficult than courage. They required honesty. The samurai didn't fear the blade. He feared dying while still alive, becoming a ghost in his own skin, a man who had surrendered his soul long before his body gave out. And so, he prepared. Every morning, 7 deaths, 7 reckonings. Chapter 1. The Death of the Body. There was a man named Kenji who lived in modern-day Osaka. He worked in finance, spent 14 hours a day behind a screen, and had not felt truly alive in 6 years. He was 38 years old and could not remember the last time he had been afraid of anything real. Not fear in the primal sense, not the kind that sharpens you. He was afraid of missing emails, disappointing his boss, losing status. But he had never once considered that his body, the vessel carrying his mind through every one of those meaningless days, could simply stop. That his heart could betray him in a conference room. That he could collapse on a subway platform and never wake up. The samurai would have called this a dangerous ignorance. The first death a samurai prepared for each morning was the death of the body. Not because he was obsessed with mortality, but because ignoring it made him reckless with his life. When you meditate on the fact that your body can fail at any moment, that no amount of planning or ambition will stop your organs from deciding they've had enough, you stop wasting your days. You stop eating poison because it's convenient. You stop sitting in rooms that make you feel small. You stop agreeing to things your soul rejects. The samurai knew that the body was the foundation of everything. Without it, there is no honor, no discipline, no presence, just dust. And so he treated it not as a machine to exploit, but as a temple to maintain with the seriousness of someone who knows it will one day burn. Kenji didn't think about his body until it forced him to. One night, walking home from the office at 11 p.m., he felt a tightness in his chest that made him stop on the sidewalk. It wasn't pain exactly. It was pressure, a warning. He stood there under a streetlight, breathing slowly, and for the first time in years, he felt his heartbeat, not metaphorically, literally. He felt it struggling. And in that moment, something inside him woke up. He realized he had been living like a man who believed he was immortal, while simultaneously living like a man who was already dead. The samurai would have told him, meditate on your body's end every morning, so you remember to use it while it still obeys you. Chapter 2. The Death of Reputation. The second death the samurai prepared for was the death of reputation. In Bushido culture, reputation was everything. It was your name, your lineage, your honor in the eyes of your lord and your community. Losing it was worse than losing your life. And yet, the samurai meditated on losing it anyway. Why? Because the fear of losing reputation makes you a slave. It makes you perform instead of live. It makes you say yes when you mean no. It makes you hide your truth because you're terrified of judgment. The samurai understood that if you do not mentally prepare to lose everything people think of you, you will spend your entire life imprisoned by their opinions. Kenji had built his entire identity around being seen as successful. He wore the right clothes, lived in the right neighborhood, spoke in the right way at the right times. But none of it was real. It was a costume he had been wearing for so long he had forgotten what his actual face looked like underneath. The samurai would have asked him, "If everyone you know forgot your name tomorrow, who would you be? If your title disappeared, if your salary vanished, if no one ever applauded you again, what would remain?" Kenji didn't have an answer, and that terrified him more than the tightness in his chest ever could. The meditation on reputational death is not about becoming reckless or arrogant. It's about becoming free. The samurai knew that the moment you stop caring whether people see you as strong, you become actually strong. The moment you stop performing honor, you begin living it. This doesn't mean you disrespect others or abandon your responsibilities. It means you stop letting the fear of judgment make your decisions for you. You stop shrinking. You stop lying. You stop pretending to be less than you are or more than you are. You become exact, precise, true. And that kind of person is dangerous not because they harm others, but because they cannot be controlled by shame. Chapter 3. The Death of Comfort. The third death was the death of comfort. The samurai lived in a world where comfort was a luxury, not a guarantee. He could be called to battle at any moment. He could be asked to leave his home, his family, his warm bed, and march into snow or rain or enemy territory with nothing but his sword and his will. And so, each morning, he prepared himself mentally to lose every soft thing he had grown attached to. He imagined the cold, the hunger, the exhaustion, not to punish himself, but to make sure that when comfort was stripped away, he wouldn't collapse. He would continue. Kenji's life was built entirely on comfort. Climate-controlled offices, delivered meals, soft chairs, endless entertainment. He had designed his entire existence to avoid discomfort, and in doing so, he had made himself weak. Not weak in body alone, though that was true. Weak in spirit. He had no tolerance for hardship. A delayed train ruined his mood. A cold shower was unthinkable. The idea of skipping a meal or sleeping on the floor or going a day without his phone felt like torture. The samurai would have seen this as a kind of death already occurring, a slow suffocation of the soul by convenience. The meditation on the death of comfort is a preparation for reality. Life will strip your comfort from you eventually. It will take your health, your money, your security, your routines. The question is not whether this will happen. The question is whether you will be ready. The samurai trained himself to need nothing, so that when everything was taken, he still had himself. He practiced cold. He practiced hunger. He practiced silence and stillness and the absence of pleasure, not because he hated joy, but because he refused to be destroyed by its absence. He knew that a man who cannot survive discomfort is a man who can be broken by anyone who controls his comfort. And so, he made himself unbreakable. Kenji started small. He began waking up at 5 in the morning, not because he had to, but because he wanted to prove to himself that he could. He took cold showers. He fasted once a week. He deleted the apps that had been numbing him for years. None of it was extreme. None of it was punishment. It was practice. Practice for the day when life would demand more from him than he thought he could give. And slowly something inside him changed. He stopped feeling fragile. He stopped needing the world to be gentle with him. He became the kind of man who could handle whatever came, not because he was superhuman, but because he had remembered that discomfort is not death. It's just discomfort. Chapter 4. The Death of Attachment. The fourth death the samurai prepared for was the death of attachment. In Zen philosophy, which deeply influenced the samurai code, attachment is the root of suffering. When you cling to people, to outcomes, to possessions, to ideas of how your life should look, you give those things power over your peace. The samurai meditated each morning on the possibility that everything he loved could be taken from him. His family, his master, his home, his sword, even his life's purpose. Not because he didn't love these things, but because he loved them so much that he refused to let his love become a chain. Kenji had been attached to a vision of his life that no longer existed. He was attached to the idea that if he worked hard enough, if he sacrificed enough, if he performed well enough, he would eventually feel fulfilled. But the fulfillment never came. The promotions didn't satisfy him. The raises didn't make him feel secure. The recognition didn't make him feel seen. He was chasing a ghost, and the ghost was winning. The samurai would have told him that attachment to outcome is a betrayal of presence. When you are attached to how things should be, you cannot see how things are. And when you cannot see how things are, you are blind. The meditation on the death of attachment is not about becoming cold or indifferent. It's about becoming fluid. Water does not cling to the shape of the container. It fills it. And when the container breaks, the water flows elsewhere. It does not mourn the container. It does not curse the universe for breaking it. It simply continues. The samurai trained himself to love deeply without grasping, to commit fully without demanding permanence, to honor his relationships and his path without making them the source of his identity. This made him both softer and harder. Softer because he could appreciate the moment without needing it to last forever. Harder because nothing could break him when it ended. Kenji began practicing this in small ways. He stopped checking his phone every 3 minutes to see if someone had responded to him. He stopped refreshing his email obsessively, looking for validation that never came. He stopped planning his happiness around events that might never happen. He started sitting with the discomfort of not knowing, not controlling, not securing. And he found something strange. The less he clung, the more life gave him, not because the universe rewarded him, but because he finally had his hands open to receive. Chapter 5. The Death of Ego. The fifth death was the death of ego. This is the hardest death for most people to imagine, let alone prepare for. The ego is the voice inside you that says you are special, that you deserve recognition, that you should be treated a certain way, that your opinions matter more than they do, that your suffering is unique, that your story is the center of the universe. The samurai did not see the ego as evil. He saw it as a distortion, a lens that bent reality into a shape that served the self at the expense of truth. And so, every morning, he imagined his ego dissolving. He imagined being wrong, being humiliated, being forgotten, being ordinary, and he practiced not flinching. Kenji's ego had been running his life for decades. Every decision he made was filtered through the question, how will this make me look? Every conversation was a performance. Every failure was a wound to his identity. Every criticism felt like an attack on his existence. He couldn't separate himself from his accomplishments or his mistakes. He was his resume. He was his bank account. He was the sum total of what other people thought of him. The samurai would have seen this as a form of madness, a prison made of mirrors, where you are both the guard and the prisoner, endlessly watching yourself, endlessly judging yourself, endlessly exhausting yourself with the performance of being someone. The meditation on the death of ego is a practice of humility, but not the kind of humility that makes you small. The samurai's humility was a recognition of scale. He understood that he was one man in one moment in a world infinitely larger and older than himself. His life mattered, but it did not matter more than anyone else's. His honor was real, but it was not the center of reality. His suffering was valid, but it was not exceptional. This perspective didn't diminish him. It freed him. Because when you stop defending your ego, you stop wasting energy on battles that don't matter. You stop arguing for the sake of being right. You stop taking everything personally. You stop collapsing when someone criticizes you, because you understand that criticism is information, not an attack on your soul. Kenji started practicing ego death in his daily life. When someone disagreed with him at work, instead of defending himself immediately, he paused. He listened. He asked himself, am I defending the truth, or am I defending my need to be right? Most of the time, it was the latter. When he made a mistake, instead of justifying it or hiding it or blaming someone else, he simply acknowledged it. He said, I was wrong. I will do better. The first few times felt like dying. His whole body resisted, but then something shifted. He realized that admitting fault didn't destroy him. It clarified him. It made him lighter. The samurai knew this. He knew that the death of ego is not the end of self. It's the beginning of self-mastery. Chapter 6. The Death of Certainty. The sixth death the samurai prepared for was the death of certainty. In a world of combat, nothing was guaranteed. The best swordsman could be defeated by a novice if the wind shifted at the wrong moment. The most carefully laid plans could be undone by a single, unexpected variable. The samurai accepted this. He trained relentlessly, studied strategy obsessively, prepared meticulously, but he never confused preparation with certainty. He knew that the universe did not owe him predictability, and so each morning he meditated on the collapse of his expectations. He imagined his plans failing, his assumptions proving false, his understanding of the situation being completely wrong, and he trained himself to adapt instantly, without panic, without resentment, without freezing. Kenji had spent his entire adult life trying to eliminate uncertainty. He made spreadsheets. He planned 5 years ahead. He tried to control every variable, manage every risk, predict every outcome. And it never worked. Life kept throwing him curveballs. People acted in ways he didn't expect. Markets shifted. Relationships ended. Opportunities vanished. And every time it happened, he felt betrayed, as if the world had broken a promise it never made. The samurai would have told him that certainty is a lie you tell yourself to feel safe. But safety is not the same as strength. A man who needs certainty to function is a man who will shatter the moment reality deviates from his script. The meditation on the death of certainty is a training in responsiveness. The samurai didn't seek to predict the future. He sought to be ready for any future. This is a completely different orientation. When you accept that you cannot know what will happen, you stop wasting energy trying to control the uncontrollable. You stop clinging to plans that are already obsolete. You stop arguing with reality when it doesn't match your expectations. Instead, you become fluid, observant, present. You watch what is actually happening, not what you thought would happen, and you respond accordingly. This makes you dangerous in the best sense of the word, because you cannot be thrown off balance by surprise. Surprise is your natural state. Kenji began to practice this by doing small things differently. He took routes he had never taken. He said yes to invitations he would normally decline. He allowed conversations to go in unexpected directions without trying to steer them back to his agenda. He stopped finishing other people's sentences in his head. He stopped assuming he knew how things would end. And slowly, he noticed that his anxiety began to decrease, not because his life became more predictable, but because he stopped demanding that it be predictable. He stopped needing to know. He became comfortable in the unknown. The samurai lived there, in the space between breaths, in the moment before the sword falls, in the silence where anything is possible and nothing is guaranteed. Chapter 7. The Death of Yesterday. The seventh death the samurai prepared for was the death of yesterday. This is the most subtle death, and perhaps the most important. Every morning, the samurai released his attachment to who he was the day before. He didn't carry his victories into the new day as proof of his worth. He didn't carry his failures as evidence of his inadequacy. He didn't carry his identity as a fixed thing that must be defended. He understood that clinging to yesterday, whether it was glorious or shameful, prevents you from being fully present today. The past is dead. And if you keep trying to resurrect it, you become a ghost. Kenji had been haunted by his past for years. He replayed old conversations. He mourned missed opportunities. He celebrated achievements that no longer mattered. He held grudges against people who had forgotten about him. He carried the weight of every mistake, every embarrassment, every moment he wished he could redo. And that weight was crushing him. It kept him from moving. It kept him from changing. It kept him from seeing that the person he was 5 years ago, or 5 months ago, or even 5 minutes ago was not the person he had to be right now. The samurai would have told him, "You are not your history. You are your next decision." The meditation on the death of yesterday is a daily rebirth. Each morning, the samurai woke up as if he were being born again, with no debt to his former self, no obligation to remain consistent with who he used to be. This didn't mean he had no memory or no continuity. It meant he refused to be imprisoned by his own narrative. He could change his mind. He could admit he had been wrong for years. He could abandon a path he had invested everything in without shame, without needing to justify it, because he understood that growth requires the death of old identities. You cannot become new while clutching the old version of yourself like a security blanket. Kenji started to practice. Every morning, before he did anything else, he sat in silence and he let go. He let go of the argument he had yesterday. He let go of the praise he received last week. He let go of the person he thought he was supposed to be by now. He let go of the story he had been telling himself about his life. And in that space of release, he asked himself one question: who am I choosing to be today? Not who was I, not who should I be. Who am I choosing to be right now, in this moment, with the awareness and the agency I currently possess? The answer changed every day. And that was the point. The samurai understood that these 7 deaths were not morbid rituals. They were liberation practices. By meditating on the death of the body, he learned to honor his physical existence and stop wasting it. By meditating on the death of reputation, he freed himself from the prison of other people's opinions. By meditating on the death of comfort, he made himself resilient and unbreakable. By meditating on the death of attachment, he learned to love without clinging and commit without demanding permanence. By meditating on the death of ego, he stopped defending illusions and started seeing clearly. By meditating on the death of certainty, he became fluid and responsive instead of rigid and brittle. And by meditating on the death of yesterday, he gave himself permission to be reborn every single morning. Kenji didn't become a different person overnight. He didn't solve all his problems or achieve some enlightened state. But he changed in the ways that matter. He stopped sleepwalking. He stopped pretending. He stopped waiting for permission to live the life he actually wanted. He began each day by sitting in silence and facing the 7 deaths, not with fear, but with clarity. And over time, he noticed something the samurai had known for centuries. When you prepare for death in all its forms, you stop being afraid of life. When you accept that everything can be taken, you stop living like a man trying to protect his possessions. You start living like a man with nothing to lose and everything to give. The samurai's morning ritual was not about becoming obsessed with death. It was about becoming awake to life. Most people live as if they are immortal, and because of that, they waste their days on things that do not matter. They postpone their truth. They avoid hard conversations. They stay in situations that are slowly killing them because they believe they have infinite time to make a change. The samurai knew better. He knew that time is the only resource that cannot be recovered, and that every morning you waste is a morning you will never get back. And so he began each day by remembering that this day, this breath, this moment could be his last. Not to make himself afraid, but to make himself present. Not to make himself reckless, but to make himself deliberate. If you are reading this or hearing this and something inside you is stirring, it's because you already know this truth. You already know that you have been dying in small ways every day without even noticing. The death of your potential, the death of your honesty, the death of your courage, the death of your attention. You have been giving yourself away in pieces to things and people and systems that do not deserve you. And you have been telling yourself that you'll reclaim yourself later. But later is not guaranteed. The samurai knew this. And that's why he didn't wait. Every morning he prepared. Every morning he faced what most people run from their entire lives. Every morning he chose to be awake. You don't need to be a warrior to practice this. You don't need a sword or a code or an ancient lineage. You just need to be willing to sit with the truth, to look at your life and ask yourself, what am I dying to that I haven't acknowledged? What comfort am I clinging to that's making me weak? What version of myself am I dragging into today that no longer serves me? What certainty am I demanding that's keeping me rigid? What reputation am I protecting that's keeping me small? The answers will come if you're brave enough to ask. And once you have the answers, you have a choice. You can keep living the way you've been living, pretending that death is something far away, something that only happens to other people, something you'll deal with when you're forced to. Or you can do what the samurai did. You can prepare. Every morning, 7 deaths, 7 reckonings, 7 opportunities to remember that you are alive, and that being alive means something.